I don't know if you've ever been tormented to the point where you felt like you had to move away from the house that you were currently living in. But if you have, I am very sorry. I know from firsthand experience that that is a level of fear that no one should ever have to feel. I was living with my wife, Melinda. We had a small single-floor home in the back roads of Pennsylvania. We had lived there for 8 years of our life before getting chased out. You see, where we lived, there weren't too many people around. Our house was off a back road in the middle of the woods, and our closest neighbor was about a minute or so down the road. But around 2015, there had been a string of local break-ins. So my wife and I decided to get one of those doorbell cameras that hooked right up to your phone. And for the most part, the thing was more of a nuisance than anything. Seeing how we lived in the woods, my phone was constantly going off with notifications saying that there was movement at the door, but it would end up being a squirrel or some other critter. Eventually, I grew to just ignore the thing. That was until one evening. It must have been around 2 a.m., the first time that it happened. My phone had been going off because of the camera, but I figured it was an animal, and I tried to sleep through it. But then, the sound of the doorbell going off rang through the house. My wife and I shot up, and I immediately grabbed my phone to take a look through the camera. And when I turned on the app, my wife gasped. There were 3 men standing on my porch wearing ski masks. One of them kept putting their face really close to the camera, and I don't think they knew I could hear them because they kept saying, if they answer, grab them, over and over again to each other. One of the men's fingers covered the camera as it pressed the doorbell again. It was at this point that my wife was on the phone with the sheriff's department, asking for them to send assistance. But after a moment, the 3 men seemed to vanish without a trace, and by the time the police showed up, there was no sign of them. Mel and I didn't sleep for the rest of the evening, and I couldn't help but keep checking the camera. The next month or so went by normally, with no signs of any other unwanted visitors. We had finally begun to feel a sense of normalcy and been able to sleep through the night again. That was until one night, around the same time, my phone went off. And this time, I was in the habit of checking it every time. This is good, because this time, they didn't ring the doorbell. I opened up the app to find the 3 men back, and it looked like one of them was trying to pry the front door open with a crowbar. I woke up Melinda and told her what was going on. She immediately called the police, and I began locking the door and piling anything that I could in front of it. By the time I had finished, I heard the slam of the front door flying open. They were inside the house. Thankfully, the sheriffs were already on their way, and when the men saw the lights, they went sprinting out of the house and into the woods. Our lease happened to be up at the end of that month, so Melinda and I made the conscious decision to move to a new place, especially considering those men haven't been caught. Needless to say, we have another doorbell camera installed in our new home. To start off my story, I should explain that where I live is in a very suburban area, and the road I live on happens to be lined with houses. We aren't quite inside of the city, but we aren't too far, and my house happens to be the first on our road. Meanwhile, the bus stop where the kids get picked up from school is at an intersection where our roads meet the main road. So typically, the kids would get picked up and dropped off almost right in front of my house. This was never an issue for anybody, and as the years passed, fewer and fewer kids went to school on the street, and nowadays, it's just one boy who is in middle school. Up until a few weeks ago, Jonathan and I had never spoken, and I didn't know his parents too well, but thankfully, that didn't stop him from running to my house when he needed help. A few weeks ago, while I was at work, my phone went off, and I saw that it was a notification from my Ring camera. This was odd because I wasn't expecting visitors or anything, so I figured I would check it real quick, and to my surprise, it was Jonathan. He was standing on my porch breathing heavily. I pressed the speech function and asked him if he was okay and what was going on. He sounded horrified when he told me that 2 men were chasing him from the bus stop. "Please open the door," he asked. I wasn't home, but good thing for him, I'm a careless homeowner. I told him that the door was open. I told him to go in and double lock the door. He hesitated for a second, but then quickly ran inside. I heard the sound of the locks clicking, and then I called the police from the phone on my desk while keeping my eye on the Ring camera. As I was on the phone with the operator, I saw 2 men slowly walking up my driveway and up my stairs. Both of them looked to be around 40 years old, with a lot of facial hair. They tried to open the door, but Jonathan had listened and locked it behind him. By the time the police made it to my house, the 2 men were long gone, but Jonathan was okay. He hid in one of the hallway closets until the police were at the door. They notified his parents. I gave the officers screenshots of the footage from my camera. I never thought that leaving my door unlocked would actually be beneficial. I thought I was just lazy. I'm thankful that Jonathan was okay. That's all that matters. I'll never forget the look in my dad's eyes as I watched them take him from me through the camera on our door. Growing up in Kent, I've spent my whole life dealing with kids who ended up running with gangs. I was always lucky to keep my head out of any trouble and to stay away from that sort of life. That doesn't mean that it didn't affect me though. When I was just 14 years old, I was sitting in my living room, watching some TV and enjoying a small snack while I waited for my parents to get home from work. We didn't have a car, but that was fine because the bus stop wasn't too far away, and since it was Wednesday, it meant my dad was going to be getting home an hour before my mom. Now, considering how dangerous our neighborhood potentially was, a lot of us had camera systems in our doorbells, and I had access to the app on my phone. I'll never forget, I heard running up the driveway, which was odd because my dad wasn't a very fit guy, so he never ran home. But I heard heavy steps as they came up the front porch, and I'll never forget the sound of keys jingling and hitting the ground as my dad let out a small shout. At that point, I could hear what sounded like multiple men huffing and puffing, so I pulled up the camera app. I would have gone straight for the door, but admittedly, I was terrified from the noises. And when I saw what was going on, it all became clear. My dad must have run into one of the groups that like to run people down and take what they have, especially if they're alone. I saw 3 men, all with knives, stabbing and slashing at my father. I began to run toward the door, and he must have heard it, because through his pain, I heard him yell for me not to unlock the door. I froze. I didn't know what to do. We lost my father that day. But luckily, our camera was able to catch the face of 2 of his killers, and they led the authorities to the 3rd. My dad would be happy to know that justice was served, but I will never be happy to know that my dad is gone forever. And for what? The 20 pounds that he had in his wallet or his busted up phone? I'll never forget the terror on his face as they cut into him